coming up on the Canna Cribs Podcast.
Well, we only just got out of there with our lives, so...
Really?
Went from...
Disease, government, rebels...
all of those things. For me, seeds are, by design, the perfect capsule for that. So if you do your breeding work well, there isn't much need for tissue culture for production. I think breaking those boundaries and taking that risk is important, and also, how quickly people get used to things and what changes has sped up a lot as well, right? So I think diversity is always the key.
Hey, I'm Nick, creator of Cannacribs and Growers Network, where we have educated millions of people on how to elevate their craft. I have toured some of the largest grow operations, befriended the best growers, and built a network of the top cannabis companies. Join me on this next adventure where I document history with the pioneers shaping the global cannabis industry in real time. Welcome to the Canna Cribs Podcast. The Canna Cribs Podcast is brought to you by the top brands in the game. We have 5 categories we want to highlight to help you elevate your craft. Cultivation by Grodan, lighting by Horticultural Lighting Group, nutrients by Athena, post-harvest by GreenBroz, and dispensary by Treez. Thank you to these partners for helping us create the podcast and bring more knowledge to the world. If you want to support the Canna Cribs Podcast, head on over to the link in the description or go to growershouse.com and check out these industry leaders today. I know you from Tucson and Sunday Goods, and when I first started hearing about you, I think, Nate had told me, Sjoerd Broeks is, coming into the store to pick up some lights or, whatever it was. Yeah. And I started looking you up, and I was amazed. This small little Tucson town had a living legend, walk into our office. And I was just like, dude, that's so cool. We got to film with you sometime. And I know we ended up filming at Sunday Goods, but tell me how this all started. Where did you start, and how did you get on this path with the plant?
Well, I was born in Holland, but I grew up in England, so I have, a different kind of dynamic, I guess, because I moved around a lot. So creating a timeline is a little confusing, but the nice thing is my parents in Holland, they traveled a lot. We traveled to Asia, to India, and they were looking for hash. And they also grew a lot of weed back in Holland, but not really in a commercial sense. It was, I guess, more of a hobby from seeds out of Indonesian and Thai stuff. And
wow. So
for me, I've always been...
You were born
actually surrounded by it, like whether it's inhaling the hash smoke, the Nepalese or Afghani stuff, like it's all really clear, and like most of my memories have some kind of association with cannabis. So, and always had a really good feeling about it, So it wasn't a big stretch to, I moved to England when I was 8, and they want you to go into the army. It was like Falklands War, that kind of stuff.
Oh, wow.
And I told them, like, no, I'm going to move back to Holland one day and grow weed. They didn't really register very well with them. So, but I've always been pretty anti-authoritarian.
Yeah.
So.
Me too.
It's just keep moving, and
yeah.
And and I left school, and I guess I smoked with my mum around 89 for the first time, and used to pick a lot of mushrooms when I was a kid. Sold a lot of skunk weed in the early 90s through the 90s. Pretty, Amsterdam seeds, some Jack Herer and that kind of stuff. But pretty skunky, but mostly because it was bagged wet, so you get that kind of smell. But we didn't really know better.
Yeah.
And then when I was, I guess, 97, I moved back to Amsterdam. And around that time, like some old colleagues of my parents were working in Amsterdam, including Eddie of the Flying Dutchmen, and they were building out the Cannabis College. It was going to be like an information center for tourists, because Amsterdam back then
was
really
the spot.
It was the spot, like where everybody went. It was kind of the center of the cannabis universe. So they built this information center based around Green Prisoners Release, which was raising money for lawyers for people in the States who were incarcerated, especially in southern states. So it's kind of information about that and money raising for that. Industrial hemp, like all the paint was made out of hemp seed oil, hemp herds on the walls. The walls were built out of hemp.
Wow.
But we had a 150 plant garden downstairs, and I remember being really high, and they were in the next door, like all those youths, like talking about whether I'd be up to looking after that garden, and they came out and said that they picked me to be their first kind of gardener, so to speak.
Wow.
These 150 plants. So I was super happy about that. And so even though I'd been working around cannabis, I'd never really had a day-to-day career and growing it.
What age are we talking about, Sjoerd? Is that like 23, 25 when you took over kind of as the director of cultivation or master gardener?
Yeah, I mean, it was just the gardener back in those days. So
yeah, just the gardener.
Like water the plants, but I guess that was 97, so I would have been 24 at that point, I think, roughly. Yeah.
Wow.
So it's a pretty big opportunity, because we're surrounded by all these people that had been doing it for all that time and used to grow out like multi-hectare greenhouses for seed selections and stuff. And Rob Clark used to go in there, and Ed Rosenthal, Jack Hare, all those people used to go to the college regularly back then. So yeah, it was pretty epic to see some of my heroes.
Just walking around and just heroes, legends.
And being able to talk about cannabis, like freely. That's why the cups used to be epic back then, And we also used to get nurses from Scandinavia. Like most of the Dutch people got busted in Sweden at some point smuggling hash. Sweden was like the hardest place to get into.
Okay. But
when we'd get Swedish nurses down learning about cannabis, things like that would make it really worthwhile. It was pretty cool.
Yeah.
And that was a college, and it was kind of connected to the Flying Dutchmen, which used to be a wholesale company, and they kind of went retail at the same time. So I got to grow out all the seeds from all the different companies at that time.
In that 150 plant garden, you just get to kind of rotate through the best of the best genetics.
Yeah, exactly. And we didn't even know if they were the best. They were just, this is what we're selling in the store. So we take a pack or 2 packs of everything we were selling, and we grow them down in the garden. And then when people wanted to come buy seeds, they'd actually see those varieties being grown from seeds. So they knew what to expect from a pack or 2 packs of TH Seeds, Sagarmatha, Greenhouse, Paradise. There were quite a few seed companies kind of starting at that time.
Yeah. So this is late 90s in the Netherlands, and Flying Dutchmen Seed Co. Were you kind of doing R&D for them? Were you helping build the company? What was kind of your role at that point?
I mean, my first job after looking after the garden in the college was to look after the library for the Flying Dutchmen, so like the living plant library. And that was like 98, 99 and onwards, up until like 2005 roughly, on and off. And that had all those selections that those guys had pulled since the mid 80s were all there as living plants. So, and I didn't have anything to do with those initial selections, but I worked for Eddie from the Flying Dutchman to essentially keep those plants healthy and then pull them for seed production. And put them in the college as well to flower sometimes. So we used to have some hazes in there, and like refresh some of it, put it outside every spring to kind of rejuvenate all those plants. And So yeah, they kind of put me in charge of that, and then I started kind of running more the R&D side of the Dutchman, where I could kind of create more diversity in their lines. That's when I started. Everything was something crossed with skunk. So Swat with skunk or Hindu Kush with skunk. So
that was the wedding cake of the late 90s.
Yeah, right. And so, yeah, Eddie gave me a lot of leeway to run a lot of inline breeding stuff, a lot of back crosses, some out crosses, just kind of change things up a little bit. Pure Kushes with pure hazes, that kind of stuff. So we had some success with that. We'd run a lot of lines, and some were pretty good, but it was still pretty raw. It was all those initial selections.
Yeah.
From the mid '80s that were brought over from California in the late '70s, early '80s. So you had to grow a lot of plants to find really good ones. So
absolutely. Yeah. So I've seen a lot of origins from both the growing side, the breeding side of the industry, also the equipment side of things. Gavita lights, for example. I'm tracking a lot of origin back to the Netherlands. Why is that? What was the kind of the reasoning behind Dutch grown cannabis ahead of a lot of the world?
I mean, it definitely didn't start in Holland. Holland was a little bit behind, actually, because all the best genetics were in the States or in their country of origin, Right. So I think in the 70s, maybe 60s, and definitely through the 70s and 80s, all the work was still the best work in the world was still being done in California and different places as well in the States. But really, everything came from, the States, and Holland just happened to be the beneficiary of people taking seeds back there. There was like a gap in time where the Dutch didn't really know what weed was. Like, they knew what hash was. They would bust hash coming in, but they didn't really focus on plants being grown. Like, my stepdad had half an acre in his backyard, when I was a kid. So didn't really know. And for a short period of time, these groups are able to grow, a couple acres in a greenhouse to do their selections. And I think that little window of time allowed a lot of good genetics to go to cerebral seeds, which is later Sirius and Sagarmatha, Sensi seeds, Flying Dutchmen, like some of these original groups are able to pull these really good genetics and develop them. So it's just human beings using a little window of opportunity.
Yeah. What was that window of time? Like, what was the first year, and kind of has it ended? Is that window still going?
I mean, yeah. For them, it was before my time. I mean, that was 84, 85, I think.
Okay.
They brought genetics over and did that work. So by the time I was there, those plants had already been housed in a library for 12, 15 years, whatever it was. But people kept growing, so everyone's growing indoor. And they did start cracking down on it a lot. You have subsidized housing in Holland in a way. So, if you go on a waiting list, you only pay, you pay about half in rent what you would expect to pay. But if they catch you growing, they take that away for life. They take you off that list and things like that. So they take you off any benefits or health things you might have. So they started getting kind of nasty and flying helicopters and that kind of stuff, like really cracking down on that production. But on the other side, the coffee shops were able to sell it out the front door.
Thriving.
So
it's like growers, chicken or the egg, like where did it come from?
Yeah. You have growers growing it, they sell it illegally through the back door of the coffee shop, and then the sale of the same cannabis out the front is not legal but tolerated.
And taxed, I would assume.
And for sure, yeah, tolerated.
So they were benefiting. I mean, the government was benefiting. Yeah, for sure. And that's to this day, isn't that right, Sjoerd? Like, there are still coffee shops holding it down in Amsterdam.
Yeah. The Dutch are doing a they're like experiments in Holland. They're doing, I think it's a 5-year experiment. It might be less, but they're giving 10 licenses. And the goal of it is to reduce crime. I'm not sure exactly what crime, whether that's importing hash or growing or kind of nuisance crime in cities, or I'm not really exactly sure. But they have 5 years to prove that giving licensed growers the opportunity to feed coffee shops will reduce crime. And if it's successful, they'll extend the experiment, past the 5 years. So
everyone be on your good behavior. We need this to go well.
Yeah, exactly. So there's 10 license holders in Holland now, all doing their build outs and everything. So
wow.
Yeah, it's good. They're behind Germany, and they're behind other countries, but they're doing it the Dutch way. It's
right. So a lot of breeding happening in the United States around that time, but still very illegal. And you said those genetics, Holland and just the Netherlands in general are kind of the beneficiaries of those genetics. There was some kind of relaxed laws allowing for some cultivation, but then it regressed, and now we're in this kind of weird, time, right, where certain states allow for legal cultivation. You have, regressive laws just allowing 10 growers. It's an interesting time. Is there a country, in your opinion, that's doing it right now? A model that other countries should follow after?
I have no idea. I think it's all an experiment.
Yeah.
I mean, quite often when a state starts to put out a system and then the next 5 states copy it, there's some improvements and then there's some things that go wrong. I don't know. When you make it too easy, there's too much production, and when you make it too hard, there's not enough inclusivity. So
yeah,
I think it's going to take a long time before everybody who wants to grow can grow and not get overtaxed and can get some shelf space that isn't fully controlled and for sale. And just that model of farmers being able to sell directly to shops and that kind of stuff. I mean,
yeah.
I just think it's going to take a long time before we have a model that works for everybody.
You think it will follow the path more of a free market where there'll be kind of whatever the market will bear, or do you think we'll go down the route of a commodity where the government will subsidize, cannabis farmers to make sure there's not too much?
I think in the States it'll always be a free market.
Okay.
When it's valuable, everybody grows it, and then hopefully it'll settle down where the people that really love it and who are in it, they will continue to do it because that's all they want to do. They love the plant, and then once it settles down, hopefully it will, whatever's left, that will hold some kind of space for those small farmers. Whether they group together or there's rules in place that allow them to sell directly to consumers. I'm not sure, but it's just human nature. It's the same when Switzerland opened up with their little pillowcases of weed that you're allowed to have. Every Dutch company in existence went down there, and then they all went to Spain. Like as soon as something opens up, everybody just jumps.
Piles in, yeah.
I think it'll take a little while to settle, and as long as they figure out, the amount of retail places, the way that farmers can get shelf space, the taxes, once they figure that out, then hopefully there's a good place.
Yeah. I think the 3 things that we all strive for: education, access, and a clean product. Something that's not going to get us sick. And when there is a black market and there's not oversight, it kind of goes both ways. And you could, kind of argue that without some form of regulation, we could be consuming something with nasty pesticides on it. It might not be taxed, but we might not want to be consuming that. It's very, very interesting. So kind of off and on until 2005 with the Flying Dutchmen company. I'm sure you were, kind of going around the world and had some projects abroad. Could you talk to me about that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, once I got established with the Dutchmen and grew, growing out the seeds, testing them, making some crosses, I had the opportunity to start going and working on some licensed projects around the world. In 2002, that was kind of a big deal, and I was still a kid, really, like 27. Yeah. So I didn't really know what I was doing, but we did have these projects. Some were pretty big. There's one 40-acre one in sub-Saharan Africa. We spent a few years down there, developing cultivars and some artemisinin for malaria. We ran projects for that for the government. It was pretty, intense work. It's one of the wettest places on the planet.
Really?
And there with, a bag of 500,000 seeds and, a couple of hundred guys and no machinery or equipment trying to carve out, 40 acres out of the savannah there. And it was a pretty epic experience. And then I got to see, those plants growing out under pressure. 100% humidity, everything's trying to
take it out,
get you and kill you and the plants, So we had a real interesting couple of years. Just starting with those 500,000 and losing probably 85% of those in the first round to mold, and then sorting through what was left, what was really resistant.
How did you do it? I mean, with 100% humidity, how did you do it?
It's just insanity. And then we were like, okay, well, we should build some greenhouses for the rainy season, which is literally 100% humidity, just no rain. And just kept running those varieties that did well. And out of those plants, I think we ended up with 5 like bulletproof varieties and 15 or 20 that were pretty good.
Do you recall the names of those cultivars?
I do. There was a couple of triploid skunks, and they had their own issues as far as intersects and that kind of stuff. We selected against that. There were some hay skunks, and none of the cushions survived. Everything with cush in it was just eaten alive by
decimated.
4 weeks in flower. Some of the Thai skunks, a couple of those did well. White Widow we had some White Widow and some stuff then. More the kind of equatorial varieties did well, but it was pretty brutal to watch, and then just the whole 40 acres compressed down to an area where you're trying to rejuvenate all these plants under daylight bulbs, and watching 99% of those selections not make it either.
That's tough.
And you're looking for that little new shoot coming out to reshoot into a vegetative plant. It was pretty brutal because we basically ran all the seeds straight away. We didn't have that much backed up, so we had to work.
Wow.
So it was a good project. We did a lot of, fixed a lot of roads, built a health center, built a school, had a couple of hundred guys working.
It was an ecosystem. It was more than just growing the plant. You were growing the community around you.
Yeah, and for me, I was really excited then as well, because if you can create this small start, you can replicate it. If you can give people a way to test for disease, and you can give clean water, and you can give them some form of mobility and a job. It's good times, but definitely some of them are more stressful times in my life. That was interesting, and it was just incredible to see all the diversity and the seeds growing out, at that time.
Yeah. So you're 27. How does that project land on your plate? Is it, kind of bounce?
Yeah, I don't know, because who do you know to ask? Like these are not projects that really have been done before, especially in those areas. So there isn't really anybody that has experience in it. Not white guys, anyway. So I think it was just luck or, unlucky, depending on how you want to look at it.
Yeah.
Me, of course, I'm like, oh yeah, totally, I can do that. That's what you say when you're in your 20s. Oh, absolutely, no problem, I got this. So
bite off more than you can chew and try to learn how to chew faster.
And learn from there. So, and kind of since, it's always been how I've approached things in a way where I'm always doing new things and forcing myself to be constantly learning.
Mm-hmm.
I'm lucky enough to grow at scale back when that was kind of a new thing. And now it's totally gone flip side. Now I don't want to grow more. I don't want to grow bigger. I've gone completely the other way now. Now I want more consolidate all the experiences and the relationships that we have with the people that we really like, different breeders and growers, and we'll grow our part and they'll grow their part. And, it's kind of flipped now because now a lot of people are growing at scale, and that can be part of the problem as opposed to part of the solution. Because when we were growing a lot, it was because there wasn't enough weed for everybody. It's definitely a different situation now.
Yeah.
So.
Absolutely. So you're out there in, 2 to 3 years, you're done with the project. Where do you go from there? Are you on to the next project? Or are you kind of sticking around?
The one we're doing here?
No, back in that Saharan project.
Oh, God. Well, we only just got out of there with our lives, so I
really
went from
disease, government, rebels,
all of those things.
Okay.
Yeah, all of those things at once.
We got to write a movie about this, my friend.
Pickets, strikes, politics. It was insane. But we were on house arrest for a few weeks, and we didn't leave a hotel at that point, so that was good. They couldn't do anything. We had permits, we had licenses, but politics, it just depends on who's holding the piece of paper at the time.
That's right. And at the beginning of the project, the political party that was holding the paper was welcoming you and saw you and your team as helpers and helping to solve a problem. But by the time that changed to a new political party, you guys were no longer seen as that?
Pretty much, and it's local politics too. It's when people find out something, if one group finds out another group is doing something and they can figure out a way to embarrass them with that said thing, then that can create issues. So, but it was all above board. It's just I was happy to get out of there at that point. Like just getting through customs and sitting on that plane and waiting for it to take off. Was,
sigh of relief.
And then being a kid, I'm like, cool, where next? So, so I did several other projects after that. Kind of toughened up a little bit, I guess. And then, but still there was always that thing, as there's genetics need to be collected and saved, and there's not enough weed for people. There was always that kind of push. I always had my eyes on the States, because during the forums I used to be on Cannabis World as Genefinder back in the day, and we used to do a lot of work with Hayes, and I was always really interested in the States, because that's where all the work really came from, real rebels over here. So, I really enjoyed getting to know a lot of them during my time in Amsterdam. So,
So you're able to kind of connect the dots, take on some projects in the States and start to work with some of those breeders like Jack Herrera and others?
Yeah, not so much those guys then, but when I moved to the States, my previous partner, her mum lived in Northern California, and they had a farm. So I was like, cool, I just got custody of my son, and just let's go to the States and help your mother out, help your mum out. And so just arrived on this 99 plant plot and started trying to be as useful as possible. And then we built, I think, like 12 grows, like indoor, greenhouse, outdoor, all with different partners.
Are we talking like Emerald Triangle, NorCal, or where are we talking about?
Like Siskiyou, Tehama, Shasta, like all those kind of areas.
Cool.
Mostly dry climate.
You wanted to be away from the humidity?
I really wanted to be on the coast, but I didn't really know any better and didn't have any opportunity. I was so busy just building these grows out.
Right.
And it was a good time. It was a lot of work, and then everything started getting shut down by the local sheriff's office in all those counties. So I think in a period of 18 months, we lost almost all of those grows. Prices were dropping then too, so we consolidated down to one greenhouse and one like 50 Gavita grow little grow house. And just kept those running. So it's like a lot of builder and then contraction and then sheriffs. Yeah. So they just pin something on your gate and tell you to stop, otherwise they're going to start fining you $10,000 a day. So what are you going to do?
Holy shit.
Yeah. We didn't think it was possible that they'd be able to clear out all the growers out of all these counties, but because when you see all your friends growing and everyone's growing, you're like, no one's ever going to stop this. And then a year or 2 years later, there's no one growing anymore. So, yeah.
What exact year was that? Are we talking late 2000s? 2007?
Probably 2014.
Oh,
around that time when they were really getting rid of everybody from Tehama and Shasta. That's mostly where I was. Just everybody had these signs on their gate. It was brutal. Everybody moved. A bunch of people moved up to Oregon. Yeah, just totally cleared out in 2 years. So,
wow. Well, let's talk a little bit about that haze work. So you said you were on the form, probably multiple forms as Genefinder OG, or just Genefinder, and you're doing some haze work. Have you kept that up? Have you been continuously, working through those genetic varieties?
Yeah, I mean, I first saw haze, like NL5 haze in England, and then we made a 3-way cross, like a skunk, Northern Lights, 5 haze with the Dutchman called Twister, and it was always my favorite thing to work with, that kind of 3-way. And then I grew a ton of them on these different projects, and so it's always been pretty close to my heart. And after I got to know a few more people here, more in Arizona, they would give us all their haze work as well, and we started growing them out, 500 at a time, and just start pulling kind of faster flowering varieties, for Amnesia, Super Silver, Neville's, like A5 crosses. But I love them, but production doesn't love them, right? So it's you can get away with it a couple times at scale, and then when you have a whole bay of hazes, like what the hell are we going to do with this stuff?
Yeah.
We have some.
Super Silver Haze. I think the first time I saw that was with Scott Reach at Rare Dankness.
Okay.
In Denver. I think he was running that. That was the first time I saw it in real life.
It was an incredible cut. The 98 Cup winner in Amsterdam. That was the one that that was the best one we ever saw.
Okay.
That Scotty made for the greenhouse. That was like the epitome for me of what that cross should be. And Jack Herer is the same cross as Super Silver Haze, as Twister was, as it's all that kind of three-way between skunk and 05 and haze.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, the Super Silver Haze is definitely, Amnesia comes close, but that one cut, that was the best one that we ever saw. Yeah, Champagne is pretty good too.
Yeah. So you're in, just kind of following this timeline here. You're in NorCal, 2014-ish, around there, and just property after property is getting cleared out, and a lot of the growers are relocating. Is that at the point when you decide to head to Arizona and start working with Sunday Goods and the Pharm?
Yeah, pretty much. I spent about a year in Colorado, just working on a consultancy basis to try and get licensing for companies. So on the East Coast, we did some work in Boston, in Illinois, that kind of stuff. It was pretty short-lived. I'm not really the office kind of guy. But so I spent about a year doing that, and then I heard about an opportunity in Wilcox. So as soon as I had a chance, I flew down there and had an interview with the CEO there and the CFO at that time, and just went for it. Yeah, this sounds epic. So.
Yeah, the facility's huge, and if I recall, we did a Cannacribs episode with you. That's where we first met. And if I recall correctly, it was a tomato facility that got flipped into cannabis. Is that right?
Yeah, it was built in '97, and it had nothing to do with the Eurofresh. It was privately owned by this guy called Shaq. He originally built it out to just have vented cooling, because Wilcox is like 4,800 feet elevation. So it started off like a hothouse, and he eventually kind of put in cooling pad and fan systems a little bit. But yeah, they were growing mostly tomatoes and ornamentals, like ornamentals and herbs when we got there. So it was pretty run down, to say the least. So yeah.
So that facility that we filmed, when we were there, you were, I guess, director of cultivation or director of plant science. What was the exact role?
Director of cultivation was kind of my starting role there. I think I started off as cultivation manager and then cultivation director.
Nice.
And there's nobody else there.
Yeah,
eight of us started that thing.
That's insane. It's a huge facility, and we'll definitely link it in the description, because people should definitely watch that episode and see your work in Cannacribs form. Did you bring a lot of your genetics and kind of genetic library with you to that facility?
Yeah, we tried. I mean, we definitely had genetics in storage still. Also, I was in Colorado, and we grew a lot of seeds down out in Amado. As a friend of ours who had a licensed farm in the south.
Nice.
So in the 18 months we were building out the greenhouse, we ran a lot of seed selections down there and pulled a lot of really nice material out of there. And then once Wilcox came online, we transferred it across to get it ramped up.
Mm-hmm.
But the place in Amado was also, it wasn't bad, but it was pretty basic.
Yeah.
Definitely had to be creative. But yeah, we probably started with like 40 or 50 varieties, I think, that we moved up to Wilcox.
Wow.
All in different states of health. It took a few years to really pull out like a healthy stock and a vigorous stock. And, it was all the really old OGs and all the old elite kind of cuts. And some of them were just so tired that we kind of struggled to get going because we needed fresher material, like more vigorous material. So that's basically the first year of Wilcox was just growing out. big lots, 10,000 seed lots of, varieties, 500 at a time, to just try and pull the most vigorous material out and get kickstarted.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think any of the original material that we brought up is still being grown now.
The Model G from GreenBroz is a premium continuous feed cannabis grinder that enables operations to control their material size. It removes stems and preserves the valuable trichomes that you're producing. The machine's unique milling function deconstructs buds instead of reducing them to dust. And altogether, it helps make your biomass that comes out of the Model G ideal for pre-roll production. Overall, like everything at GreenBroz, this grinder is gentle on the flower, increasing efficiency without sacrificing quality. It's built from future-proof materials, which is constructed to inhibit microbial growth, minimize cleaning time, and meet GMP requirements. At the end of the day, all of these automation solutions help you free up your staff. This grinder provides an efficient system, allowing you to skill up employees and devote labor resources to other areas of your business. GreenBroz, American-made, industry-born. And I would love to talk about more of your breeding work. And I know that we started talking about the Flying Dutchmen breeding, but take us through the evolution of your breeding career. Where did it all start? Where did it go to? And where is it at today?
Well, first, I don't really sell seeds. I usually make seeds for projects and make seeds to create backups, because when you travel a lot, it's hard, to keep clone varieties over a long period of time.
For sure.
So I always have been of that focus where everything needs to be backed up. I guess it started in, at the Dutchman. Eddie, the owner, gave me a lot of leeway to run a lot of material that was existing and just try a whole bunch of different crosses. So instead of crossing everything with skunk, we crossed pure kushes with hazes. We crossed hazes with Indian plants, Swazis with Durbans, and then also a lot of open pollination stuff. You're going to reopen it up after that more inbreeding work that had been done on some of those land races. And then, once I got sent off, on projects to grow a lot of those seeds out, then you really see what the work that you've done, which really helps, when you want to. Seed production is repeating the same crosses over and over again, and that's fine, but that kind of gets repetitive. So it's really nice to grow large populations, find outliers, and then work those, out-pollinate those, outcross those, and really see what's in there again. It's kind of the opposite of how it used to be, where we're isolating things we like from land races for whatever was needed at the time, and make it more homogeneous and more kind of acceptable. And now we're kind of doing the opposite work. Now we're really looking for real outliers that may have really interesting cannabinoids and terpenes. So doing those large grow outs back then in the early 2000s really gave me an appreciation for cannabis, how wide the diversity was, even within some of those bred populations. So enjoyed the work with the Dutchman for sure.
And I'm actually curious. So before Flying Dutchman, did your parents do any breeding? I know that you said you kind of grew up around the plant and hash, but did your parents do any breeding? Did that inspire you in the very beginning?
Yeah, we were always surrounded by a garden through my entire childhood, at least in Holland, until I moved. We had a lot of old purple and lemon varieties that were Dutch staples. I think they were still there from the Second World War, where they were used as tobacco substitutes. And then when all these hippies started bringing back seeds from Thailand and India and Afghanistan and So they used to make their own crosses, but the majority of it was still like big old sativas, like New Year's Eve haze. Like most of what I saw then was all like equatorial plants still.
Okay.
New Year's Eve haze, like that, like those giant Thai plants that never finish, you know?
Yeah. And if you smelled one of those buds today, would it just bring you back to, growing up and running through the fields? Yeah.
Especially the hash even more, because the hash, each type of hash is so specific that it's like an imprinted memory, from a particular afternoon in a particular place.
I bet. Those olfactory bulbs.
Yeah, exactly. When I smell good Nepalese or something, it just takes me straight back to being a kid.
That is so special. Not a lot of people can say that, Sjoerd. Like that. That's very unique and special. I know I did not grow up around the plant. I'm sure, most people can kind of relate. You're going through your teenage years and, buying your first bag and stuff like that. But it's pretty amazing to hear your story.
Yeah, by the time I was buying it, I was already looking at ways to grow
it. Yeah, exactly.
Ways that I could be involved. And the UK was not particularly friendly to weed at all back then. So
I bet
those first 10 years were really about selling weed and avoiding the cops,
Yeah.
Ways to grow some weed safely. But yeah.
Interesting juxtaposition going from Holland to the UK and cannabis laws, but I'm sure that the culture was still there on both sides. And people wanted good weed culture everywhere.
Yeah, so many people in England smoked weed and hash and had a really good understanding. And there was a lot of crap around as well. Like the soap bar was just, it's that where they collect all the worst hash from all over and remix it in Eritrea and then press it into soap bars and ship it out, mostly to England and France, where it was accepted. It wasn't accepted in a lot of other countries.
Yeah.
So you had some really good quality and then a whole ton of soap bar, which was pretty bad. But you'd have to hit it with a hammer.
It was actually a soap bar?
Shaped, pressed in a 9-ounce bar.
Uh-huh. So you would hit it with the hammer, and then how would you smoke it?
You had to basically torch it.
Yeah.
You had to basically napalm it to even get a crumble out of it. But it's all that was available, And
wow.
Unless, like, we had good hooks, so we had good places to buy it. So we always had real nice Thai weed and North Indian hash we had there, Nepalese. It was always in smaller amounts. Like, you had to really search for it.
Yeah, that quality.
But the English love getting high, so they, at that time, it's like quality was less important than how much of it you could get.
Interesting. Just getting as high as they could with whatever they could get their hands on.
Yeah.
So, what are you looking for when you're breeding a new variety? Are there, certain traits that you could share?
I mean, you look for everything, and then you realize, like, you try and have a really specific goal with breeding, and then you quickly realize that usually you have to compromise. There might be 5 slight variations on that goal when you're looking at the plants that you're trying to select.
Right.
So when you're working with real raw material and you're kind of starting the process, vigor is really important. The root system, the structure of the plant. You're kind of choosing some of the attributes that you would normally choose a male for, or like a male pollen donor for.
Okay.
And you want to have that in place. And then secondly, because there's nothing worse than inbreeding something and then making F1s and then there's no vigor in that line.
Waste a lot of time and resources going down the wrong path.
So much time. And then so you want to create some flexibility and run several different lines, have lots of opportunity to look at different combining abilities. So you may have 3 pollen donors with 10 receivers within one population, within one kind of varietal cultivar, I guess, just to see which ones kind of impart the recessive and dominant traits that you want, and just kind of slowly work through it. And just having several different lines just kind of protects you from going down potentially the wrong rabbit hole. Or there's no right or wrong. There's just, but so like kind of lots of variety, honing it in, stabilizing that, and then when you make the F1s out of those, doing the same again, having lots of pollen donors, having lots of receivers, and seeing which ones really give you what you want. And what's exciting is just going in there and opening it all up again.
Right. I know we were talking before this interview, and you have a career and lifetime full of breeding projects, and you have a lot of notes that you took, just kind of best practices, stuff like that. And for everyone listening in, let's start with the novice breeder. Let's start with them. So what are your best practices, Sjoerd, for someone that wants to be the next, biggest cannabis breeder in the game? What would you recommend, or where do you recommend they start?
I mean, I guess you have to love what you do, right? So if you have a real passion for a certain part of it, that you pretty much, it's like getting a tattoo, once you go down that line. So I think doing what you love, not getting pulled aside to what the trend of the year is, or the trend of the month or week, or I think that's important, right? And then really stick to what you like, and because that will develop on its own anyway. And then keep it simple, I guess, is because making seeds with cannabis is really, really easy. It's not a difficult thing to do. What's difficult is keeping track of what happens once you get started. You can go from one cross to 400 different combinations, in a year, and it's managing that. So I think keeping it simple and keep sharing it. Like that's the thing. It's my fridge is full of seeds that, like, it's hard to find the spaces to grow them. So I think sharing those is the thing that I admire most about the breeders I love, is that they're not necessarily breeders, all of them. They're more like preservationists. So they'll get material, and if they really like it, just make seeds with it and then share those seeds out.
They're preservationists.
If everybody does that, then not only can you get it back in 5 years if you lose it, it's just, and everybody will create their own lines. And what I've noticed happen a few times is people have run their own variations of these lines over time, and then what you get is you get diversity within a certain group.
Yeah.
Right? Something like Super Silver Haze and Jack Hero, for instance, they're the same cross, but essentially when you cross them together, you recreate diversity back in the pool, because there's slight differences in selection. And
right. And who are some of those preservationists, some of those top breeders that you look out for and want to do collaborations with?
I mean, I think Bodhi is probably the highlight. Like via my partner Ava, I feel really blessed to have met him and know him, and he's the epitome of that for me, where he really does travel to all these places. He really goes into the jungle and finds these plants and builds relationships with the farmers there, and just he's really finding the original sources, doing all that work, and then making initial crosses and then giving them out.
Wow.
The amount of stuff he gives away for free is incredible. And he'll turn up at the Emerald Cup with crazy Iraqi strains, Iranian strains that smell like burning tires and like totally untrimmed on the stick. And, and it's just, and those buds have seeds in them too. So, when people get a bud, they get a seed. So like just that joy of cannabis and that kind of pure unadulterated kind of joy around it and the sharing of it. That's what I would, that's like the highest goal for me, I think.
Wow. And when you look to the advanced side of cannabis breeding, what advice do you have for those breeders that are out there that maybe they're on top of their game? Maybe they're creating, different groups and varieties that other breeders are following. What advice would you have for them?
It's hard because I think if you're in that position, it's kind of your responsibility to push past what you're doing into something else, because everybody else is following you doing the same thing, right? So if you're at that forefront, it's you kind of have to break through your own stuff to the next, because everyone's there's so many. I mean, I can't even count how many breeders pop up every week, So I think breaking those boundaries and taking that risk is important, and also how quickly people get used to things and what changes has sped up a lot as well, right? So I think diversity is always the key, In Wilcox right now we produce our own in-house seed. We have 6 pollen donors happening at any one time. Each has 8 to 12 receivers. So we're creating huge amounts of diversity and growing those plants out, and really looking for really clean lines. So I guess my personal thing is like look for clean lines. Like when you get a lot of colors together, it's brown. So really like work on very specific flavors, or terpene groups, or flavonoids, however you want to describe it, and kind of select for them and towards them. And then when they're stabilized, you make your F1 crosses, like see how it imparts those flavors and what you get. It's like kind of like cleaning things up in a way. Like things are kind of muddy right now. So for me, when I'm working those lines in the last few years, I'm just looking for pure lemons, pure grapes, pure coffee, pure chocolate, like just really selecting for those smells, sometimes to the detriment of the flower structure as well. Like it's like I'm on a hunt.
There's a sacrifice sometimes.
There is, and then you can always add form and bulk and structure back into them, but those really interesting terpene compounds are really important to me anyway.
So you almost seek terpenes first.
Interesting terpenes, yeah.
Okay.
It comes from the old hash days when you get some Nepalese, and it's like it's coffee and it's caramel and it's licorice and it's gasoline, and it's like that's what sticks with me, is those groupings.
Mm-hmm.
That's what makes me really love a certain thing, and not so much other things. And when things are kind of blended too much, I lose interest. My nose wants to be excited, and my brain.
You're looking for outliers.
I am, yeah.
Yeah, that makes complete
my brain
sense.
I have to take like a double take. Like, what the hell is that?
Yeah.
And my partner Ava, like, she's really looking into like, it's kind of like wine in that way, where she's really trying to hunt down those
Gangier
smells in there, and then trying to keep that, like, amplify that in the lines, and keeping them really clear and clean is, it's like Bodhi has this, a plant, Mexican hot chocolate, and it smells just like Mexican hot chocolate. It's got a little bit of cinnamon in there, like it's great. And
I've never tasted that.
Yeah, it keeps it really exciting, and then finding cool stuff like that, and then getting them cleaned up to grow well is, it's never dull. It's never, it's always exciting.
Yeah. Speaking of Mexican hot chocolate, have you done any land racing yourself in Mexico in particular?
Not land races, more like pre-cultivated work.
Cool.
There's breeders I work with, they have a lot of amazing Mexican varieties. There's a mango biche that's really, really nice. So yeah, Bodhi does a lot of landrace stuff. So we get to grow them, but I haven't actually done any work with them yet. But
nice.
hope to soon.
Yeah. I really got to learn a lot about Bodhi through Kaju, Michael. I interviewed him on the podcast, and he just had a lot of great stories with him and Bodhi going way back.
I bet.
Super, super cool guy. So we talked a lot about seeds in your breeding projects, but what about tissue culture? Are you dabbling in tissue culture in any of your projects today?
Not really. I mean, I'd like to. I've seen a bunch of different companies kind of come up. I still struggle to trust anybody with genetics, even though it may be labeled differently or whatever. I'd rather do it in-house, and it has its own learning curve. So we're looking into it, but not really for production, more for a way to back up our selections, potentially to create tissue culture just to produce new mothers. So that we have you create a new mother, it starts indoors, it's clean until it goes into the greenhouse, and that's where the window of danger is. And then maybe you've got 6 months or 9 months before maybe you get hot Holland virus or fusarium or something. And traditionally people would take clones from those mothers to make new mothers. And when you have issues like latent viroid in your stock, you can't really do that anymore. So creating a clean start that replaces all those mothers regularly every month or every 2 months, that for me, tissue culture is really useful for that. And I've seen, I've worked with farms that have received tissue culture clones, and they do pretty well, but they definitely struggle when they first arrive. So that first week when they're still hardening off. Not saying they're all like that, but I'm still a little nervous about it.
Okay. So the jury's out. You're still learning yourself and trying to incorporate into, some of your projects on a controlled scale before you bring it, site-wide. Okay.
Yeah, for mothers and for backups, it's a total no-brainer. For full production, for like every plant that's in production is from tissue culture, I'm not ready for that yet.
Makes sense.
For me, seeds are by design the perfect capsule for that. So if you do your breeding work well, there isn't much need for tissue culture for production.
Right.
If there's a little bit of, reasonable amount of variation within the seeds, but they're all pretty homogeneous, that's pretty good. And you get to select the best ones out of those to keep those clones. And tomatoes and cucumbers, they're all, mostly grown from seed. So I think if the breeding is good, that's where I would see it staying, especially for row cropping.
Right.
So.
And you mentioned earlier, Sjoerd, about travel, right? Mm-hmm. So seeds make it pretty easy to travel. I couldn't imagine trying to go from country across the world to another country with, such a delicate, sensitive, fragile tissue culture. Just doesn't make sense at all.
People do it, and I think it'll, as far as IP transfer, where in this kind of international cannabis world that we're probably going to be living in, people have to transfer IP, and seeds are not really considered the same. So it's definitely going to be a thing, especially in controlled greenhouses. But for me, again, that's more about then using tissue culture to create new donor plants, new mother plants.
Right.
Again, and if you have a clean environment, what would be really good is if your mother plants are in a clean environment as well. And then it's only the clones going out for production that are under threat for that 12, 14-week period. And then I think you've got a pretty good balance against viroid anyway.
The Model G from GreenBroz is a premium continuous feed cannabis grinder that enables operations to control their material size. It removes stems and preserves the valuable trichomes that you're producing. The machine's unique milling function deconstructs buds instead of reducing them to dust. And altogether, it helps make your biomass that comes out of the Model G ideal for pre-roll production. Overall, like everything at GreenBroz, this grinder is gentle on the flower, increasing efficiency without sacrificing quality. It's built from future-proof materials, which is constructed to inhibit microbial growth, minimize cleaning time, and meet GMP requirements. At the end of the day, all of these automation solutions help you free up your staff. This grinder provides an efficient system, allowing you to skill up employees and devote labor resources to other areas of your business. GreenBroz, American-made, industry-born. It's really cool, how small world, the cannabis industry is today. So you're now working with Autumn from Cultivo and many other projects. And we were, chatting recently, and she's just like, hey, I'm actually 5 feet away from Sjoerd Broeks. And we had that, episode we filmed together. So super cool that you're working together on some projects. And for the fans listening, Autumn is the new host of Deep Roots. We filmed a couple episodes so far, and she's only told me a little bit about your new projects, and I'd love to learn more. I understand there's Alchemy29, Genefinder Originals, Smugglers Reserve. So maybe let's just start at Alchemy29. What's the vision of that project?
So Alchemy29 is being built to be a toll processor for other farms. And for our own projects, for our own farms, and partner farms. So essentially, it's around 70,000 square feet dedicated to drying, trimming, and pre-rolls. We have a Whistler Tech water hash unit. So doing a lot of fresh frozen.
No, that sounds great. And I know with the Whistler Tech, I'm pretty sure Autumn said it's one of the first ones in the United States market. Is that right?
There's a couple, but the most are being used for the other one is being used for hemp.
Okay.
I think there's one other one being used for high THC. But we're pretty excited, to get that unit running and start producing a lot of fresh frozen, like solventless hash and rosin.
I can't wait.
And there's so much beautiful weed being grown in Northern California. So really linking up with those farms and offering them the opportunity to dry it, bucket, trim it, and they can receive it back, or we can run it all the way through to pre-rolls or eighths, quarters, and ounces.
That's brilliant.
Solventless hash and rosin. So we want it to be able to do everything, but also you can choose. What you want, and it has to be really affordable. That's the most important thing. Farmers are struggling, and initially we kind of got that campus for our own production, but we're definitely going to produce a lot less than we intended to, because the market is pretty beaten up right now. So we would rather only grow for our own brands as they get built up, as opposed to wholesale, and then work with other farms to grow their genetics, our genetics, and just run it all through Alchemy29.
How did you come up with that name, Alchemy29?
Well, it's on the 29 in Lake. That's what the road's called.
Okay.
Alchemy, for me anyway, it means change, right? That's essentially what we're doing. Not only post-harvest, but all the way through. You have a seed, and you're using water, food, and sun to create something new, and then you're harvesting it, freezing it, or drying it, and then creating all these beautiful products out of it. So it was a kind of a no-brainer as far as that's concerned. We're affecting change at a really high quality level. Yeah.
No, it's an excellent name, and I think one of the first instances I have seen toll processing, there was this purple bees or something like that in Pueblo, Colorado, and they were running through all the raw biomass from Los Sueños farms right down the road.
Right.
And Yeah, and I think his name is Jim or something. I have to go back and check my notes, but super well run, well oiled machine and facility, and it seemed like his own purpose is kind of similar to you guys, right? Let the growers do what they do best. Let them grow, whether it's at scale or super high quality small batch. And we're just going to focus on what we do best, which is the alchemy and the chemistry and the processing. So I think it's a brilliant piece to the California puzzle right now. And I'd love to learn a little bit more about the R&D side. So you guys are going to be growing under Genefinder Originals, is that right?
Yeah, we have a few different brands. So Genefinder Originals would really be the brand that works with the breeders and with our own products that we've been selecting and working on, and then growing those in small batches and really testing the market with those to see what people really like. But some of it will be pretty outlandish, but it has to be interesting,
Yeah.
And if some of those products do well, then the breeders will get a royalty back if it goes into production for the Smugglers Reserve or the Smugglers brand. So it's kind of a what do you call it? It's kind of like an incubator for everybody to put in their material.
That's so cool. So breeders, well, I guess I'll back it up a little bit. So are growers able? I can link everything in the description. Can growers in California just email you guys and hire you for the drying, trimming, and all the way through to processing? Is it that simple? Just to kind of reach out over email? Do you have a form on your website?
The website's being built. We're still getting licensed, so we hope to be licensed for the 2023 season. But essentially, in year one, yes, like we're open for people to dry and buck and trim, and however far they want to go down that line. And then eventually, we really want to work more closely with farmers where we can agree on certain genetics and really build kind of strategy where we can get the right varieties onto the shelves for customers. So really developing that
menu curation. Yeah,
just for people, but yeah.
Super cool. And for breeders listening that want to get into the Genefinder Originals R&D program, what does that look like? Is that a similar process? Like go to your website or Instagram or email?
Yeah, it's more probably via Instagram. Cool. Right now, we don't have a lot of space to grow things out. Everything we do grow out will be full season because the farms are all outdoor grown only. And then we'll just work it from there. Maybe we can use somebody else's greenhouses to do the initial selections, and then run small like 100-pound lots or 50-pound lots just to see how it goes. But
excellent,
not for sure. Yeah,
that is super cool, and I love that you explained it, Sjoerd, as an incubator. Because that's exactly what it is. There's all these breeders out there that maybe they have their own niche, and that might make it on the menu, but they can go through your process and kind of your R&D purview, and you can work with them. And then you have the growers that you can pass those genetics to actually get it direct to consumer. So the ecosystem that you're building, it's incredible. I love it.
Yeah, I mean, I've never done anything that doesn't have some element of the greater good, or at least, to the best of your ability. And with everyone struggling, we definitely want to have an open door where it's like, if you're not able to dry it well, even if you can dry it reasonably well, we're going to have completely climate controlled,
state of the art
areas that you can get a really good dry and a really good trimming, and then really focusing on fresh frozen as well, because for a lot of farmers, they want to make extracts, but they have no way to keep it frozen or get it into the extraction process quickly enough, because it's expensive to dry product, it's expensive to trim it, it's expensive to store it. So for a lot of people, fresh frozen is a more direct route to getting some really nice hash or rosin that they can store more easily. And we want to try and do as much as possible, but only so much that we can do it really well.
Right. And excuse me, when you guys build out your grow operation, what does it look like fully at scale? This might be multi-phases or, several years in licensing down the line, but let's say 5 years. What do you envision for your grow operation?
Well, we don't want to grow for the wholesale market. So we really want to feed a percentage of our brands, right? So some of it will be grown by us, some of it will be grown by partner farms. But I hope that as they gain traction, we can increase our canopy. We have these raised beds that we got out of Israel that I used in Wilcox for the initial fully organic grows there. So if we can't go in the ground in year one, we can run those 16-inch troughs and fill them with organic soil and run them for 1 or 2 years, and then till that soil into the ground, organic soil.
Nice.
And then just build it up with cover crops and composting, and it's going to take 3 years before it's even kind of self-sustaining. But that's fine. It's
no need to rush it.
It's a small blessing that the market is the way it is. We don't want to grow that much, so we can take the slow roll. Yeah. And I hope in 5 years that those farms will be completely 100% organic with, wildflowers growing everywhere and cover crops and animals and just really solid farms, that will stand the test of time. Whether it's for cannabis or somebody chooses to grow something else, because cannabis, who knows, right? So just solid,
It sounds absolutely magical, and I told Autumn that when the time is right, whether it's this year or next year, we will definitely be out there to film. The Smugglers Reserve, the Genefinder Originals, and just the entire Alchemy29 campus and all the different parts included. It will make for an incredible episode for sure.
Yeah, no, it's exciting times. It's really nice to be up here, and Autumn and I both, I think, just after consulting for so long and helping other groups, we kind of both felt it'd be really nice to build something ourselves and to build it towards our own vision of how it should be. And because if you're consulting, then people listen to 30% of what you say, and then you still. So it's just really nice to be able to build something slowly and just focus on those brands and developing those. So
that's right. Well, thank you so much for joining me today, Sjoerd. You have a wealth of knowledge to share, and I know that you're very active on Instagram. It's Genefinder OG. I can link that in the description as well for people that are listening, just to reach out. If they have questions or projects that they can collaborate with you on. So thank you again for joining me today and sharing your story.
Great, thank you, appreciate it. Thanks.
Thanks for joining us today on the Canna Cribs Podcast, brought to you by the top brands in the game. We have 5 categories we want to highlight to help you elevate your craft. Starting with cultivation by Grodan, lighting by Horticultural Lighting Group, nutrients by Athena, post-harvest by GreenBroz, and the dispensary category by Treez. Thank you to these partners for helping us create this podcast and bring more knowledge to your garden. If you want to support the Canna Cribs Podcast, head on over to the link in the description or go to growershouse.com and check out these industry leaders today. While you're there, check us out on Instagram and join the Growers Network forum to meet growers all around the world just like you. Happy growing.